Türkçe konuşsan ben dahil kimse anlayamaz. However, it is also good to speak in English, as it is the international language, and I consider Niyazi Misri to be an international thinker. That is to say, someone who has achieved true humanity. Abandon your existence, and your heart will be emptied of narrowness. Obliterate your otherness, and the beloved will become your guest. If you put the name Niyazi Misri into Google, you'll find an amazingly high number of results, 172,000. Half the entries recorded for the name, the famous name, Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. But only 6 of these entries, when I looked in July on Niyazi, are in English. One for a Facebook page, which actually is in Turkish, and the other 5, an encyclopedia entry, a brief and less than informative biography, and 3 poems in loose translation. Unusually, not a single scholarly article or translation is mentioned, even though my friend Paul Ballanfa has actually produced one article. It doesn't appear on the Google machine. All the other Google entries are in Turkish, and even if I consulted the latest edition of Encyclopedia of Islam, there is a brief 800-word article which makes no mention of any study in English apart from a 1927 article in J.B. Brown's The Dervishes, which is so out of date as to not be worth reading. In other words, what is really striking is that Niyazi Misri may be well known and even venerated here in Turkey, but he remains hardly known at all in the non-Turkish speaking world. This is not an isolated example. Great literary figures within the Ottoman tradition, especially Sufi authors such as Mullah Fenari, Aziz Mahmud Hudai, Ismail Ankaravi, Sheikh Ghalib, etc., are equally unknown and ignored in the West at present. This is further complicated by the fact that there is a rupture between the old Ottoman Empire and the modern Middle East, with its assortment of new nation-states. This is a rupture which is not simply political or cultural or linguistic, but a matter of deep identity. As Victoria Holberg, a renowned Ottoman scholar, has observed, no state has instituted Ottoman culture as its own past, although Turkey may now be in the process of recuperating it. It is therefore with the greatest hope and delight that I welcome this conference, seeking to revive the heritage of a great Sufi master of Ottoman literature. I congratulate the organisers for their vision and enthusiasm, and I'm actually greatly honoured to have been asked to speak to this esteemed audience, especially in a new hall, and to be the first speaker to ever speak here. This paper really is about some of the aspects of the spiritual confluence of Ibn Arabi and Niyazi Misri. By confluence, I mean the way that both authors give voice to their mystical experience and their vision of humanity. But first, Malatyan soil. If you check a history book or an encyclopedia and look up Malatya, you will come across a wealth of material about this very old established town in eastern Anatolia. But like the bias of many modern historians, and I speak as a historian because I was trained as one, most historians are interested in the events of the outer world, and very little is ever written about the inner history or the history of the intellectual and spiritual masters. As you'll know, when the Seljuk Sultan, King Khusro I, regained his throne in Konya in 1205, Many scholars were invited to adorn the kingdom, to bring their expertise and help create a new ordered Muslim state. One of these was Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi. I don't want to go into details, but let's simply note Ibn Arabi spent perhaps 15 years in Malatya, and I should emphasize that is Eski Malatya, what you call now Bat al-Ghazi. 6 of these were definitely centered on Malatya. His daughter and second son were born here, as was his stepson, Sadruddin Konadi. We also know from the manuscripts that Ibn Arabi was involved in teaching and writing for long periods in Malatya, and it was home to him in a way that only Damascus would later match. It also became a great scholarly center. Scholars such as Al-Haddad Kirmani were teaching here. But this is a period that not only sows the seed for the establishment of Ibn Arabi as one of the central figures of the Ottoman intellectual landscape, through teachers such as Konevi and his library in Konya. But there is also a much less well-known heritage in the form of students of Ibn Arabi's writing in Anatolia. And I can only cite one example because we have very little evidence for more. A very important Alawi family in Malatya, who in the late 7th, 13th century transmitted Ibn Arabi's works as well as the Diwan of Ibn al-Farid. And this copy of the Diwan of Ibn al-Farid is the oldest that survives. Such continuity of human contact and transmission is far harder to map than a historical building, such as the Ulujan or a madrasa. And that is entirely to be expected, but from time to time one finds mention of Malatya as a place with a very strong spiritual tradition, especially amongst Naqshbandis, Qadris and Hanbatis. Some 400 years after Ibn Arabi, Shamsuddin Muhammad bin Ali, better known as Niazi Misri, was born in 1618 in the summer town of Asbuzi, which is where we are now. Here he began his religious education and his Sufi training, but like with most people, his real inner education began away from his hometown. It began in Cairo, where he had a dream of Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. In the dream, Niazi was addressed by Abdul Qadir, appearing as a sultan. He was addressed as a Sufi and given 2 pouches, one with silver and one with gold coins in it, representing, he was told, outward knowledge and knowledge of the way. He was also told to look for his spiritual guide outside Egypt. Gold and silver are a familiar motif in mystical experience. Silver representing the last but one stage in the 7-fold alchemical process of transformation. It represents servanthood and receptivity. However, this is not the final, true fulfillment of human potential. That is represented only by gold, which is also paradoxically the first stage, the incorruptible and unchanging essence of completion and perfection, Kemal. This Misrian vision of coins, of course, echoes the famous vision of Ibn al-Arabi himself in Mecca, in which gold and silver bricks were depicted. This dream impelled Niazi to leave Egypt and travel until he found the guide indicated, a Helveti Sheikh, Sinan of El-Mala, with whom he spent 9 years in Bursa. He was then sent to Ushak as Sinan's Khalifa, who said, "You will see that our Misri Muhammad Dervish will be contained in neither Ushak, nor in Bursa, nor in any other land. He will be a well-known guide, and one of those abiding in the station of the pole, Qutb." Well, today, as you may know, Niazi Misri became someone far more renowned than his own master, Sinan. There are over 400 manuscripts listed to his name in Turkish libraries. But please note his original name, Muhammad bin Ali, which is exactly the same as Ibn al-Arabi. He was also called Niazi Misri, and these names express something of his inner development. When I first started writing this paper, I came across three poems actually, many poems, where he talks at the end about Misri or Niazi. Don't ask who if you see Misri with outward eyes, for within the qaf of outward form, Anqa we have become. And on the other hand, we have Niazi, what they call body, heart and spirit, are just aspect within aspect within aspect. He who tastes of it unity is freed from duality. Wherever he looks, O Niazi, there appears the beloved's face manifest. I have to say now that I was recently informed scholars have a big difference about the meaning of these names, Niazi and Misri. For Golpinalo, Niazi was used for poems composed at night, and Misri was used for poems composed during the day. From Ibn Arabi's point of view, this would refer not to the physical night and day, but to night as the symbol of the ghaib, the unseen, and the day as symbol of the shuhud. And of course, the human being combines both aspects, night and day, spiritual and physical, inner and outer. However, as far as the names Niazi and Misri are concerned, the situation is more complicated. Egypt, Misr, is the place where he recognized his prophetic inheritance. So for Misri, he is Yusuf, he is Joseph. He even calls Misri in his diwan Jesus, Pagan, Adam. He calls him by all the names of the prophets. And I quote from the diwan, I am Misri, I am the king of the Egypt of my existence. Even though I am a creature, in the world of meaning, I am the most ancient secret. So he was known as Niazi Misri more than as Malatya from Malatya, because that is simply his physical bodily origin, even though in one of his poems in the diwan, he celebrates his hometown of Aspuzi, calling it the rose garden of nightingales, the gathering place for the joyful assembly of saints. So may modern Aspuzi also be this. The physical connection between Ibn Arabi and Niazi is not only in relation to Malatyan soil, but it is clear that Niazi was steeped in the writings of Ibn Arabi and Sadruddin Konevi. In his final work, Mawa'id al-Irfan, Irfan Sofrası, as it is in Turkey, he often quotes from Fusus and Futuhat and various other shorter treatises. In fact, in this work, he presents himself less as Naqshbandi or Helveti and more as Akbari. But what does it mean to be Akbari and Akbari? In modern writing, it's become quite popular to distinguish certain figures in Sufism as those who follow the teaching of Shaykh al-Akbar. Vincent Cornell, in 2001, speaks of Akbarian theology, the Akbarian perspective. Some people talk of Akbarian Sufism, or the Akbarian school, or Akbarian studies. There is, of course, what we can refer to as an Akbarian school, with great figures such as Dawood al-Qaisari, Abdul Razak al-Kashani, and so on. However, Ibn Arabi did not found a tariqah. There is no Akbariya until much later. There were no particular prescribed practices in his teaching except one, servanthood. So the term Akbarian has become used as a shorthand for authors particularly who are influenced by his writing. And I want to make one point, it's very important to remember. There is no use of the term Shaykh al-Akbar until after the Ottoman conquest of Egypt by Sultan Selim. In other words, to call somebody Akbari is, it says more about the political landscape of Ottoman society than it does about Ibn Arabi himself. But the modern word Akbarian does point to something very important, which has been understood, that he represents a watershed in terms of external and internal history. Michel Chodkiewicz has called this, the age of Ibn Arabi must be regarded as the start of a new era, a period of transition in Sufi doctrine from implicit to explicit, and the start of its transition from informality to formality. Its fundamental concepts were defined and organized in the work of Ibn Arabi into a comprehensive synthesis, and from then on, viewed as a summit or as a target, acknowledged or unacknowledged. For followers and adversaries alike, this work constitutes an essential landmark and a fruitful source of technical terminology. This is not only historical, this is trans-historical. That's to say, the impact of Ibn Arabi's teaching on anybody, of any time, any place, can be a watershed within that person's life, an essential landmark which dictates all later development. Perhaps we can refer to it as the realization that one is no longer describable as this or that, or within this or that group, no longer one of us as opposed to one of them, simply someone who has lost all name in the face of divine reality. For that reason, there can never be an Akbarian tariqa. Who would it refer to? To those who have lost themselves, or perhaps better, found themselves in God. At that point of completion of the human being, pure meaning pours through a person. And I'll leave out one section, but I'll quote the poem from Niazi in English so that you can hear what it might sound like. From eternity, we have been infamous with this love. It is only our name which is spoken, since in meaning, Anka, we have become. They thought we are in multiplicity in the world of myriad forms, yet within multiplicity, single and alone we have become. So what if we put on these garments of relativity and individuation? For stripping them off, spiritually naked we have become. We speak with the obscure lexicon of the speech of birds. Not everyone understands us, since riddles we have become. How could they understand us through words and form and body? We are neither words nor form. Pure meaning we have become. This recalls also Rumi's famous lines, I am pure light. In the Mawa'id al-Irfan, Niazi's Akbarian thought is very prominent. And obviously the title, I'm going to skip a little bit here because of time. The title refers to Surah Al-Ma'idah, and particularly the prayer of Jesus. O God, our Lord, send down upon us a banquet, Ma'idah, from heaven. It shall be an ever-recurring feast, Eid, for us, for the first and the last of us, and a sign from you. For Niazi, these heavenly banquets, these mawa'id, are the mawa'id al-irfan, wisdom or gnosis of God, directly knowing the divine. And the recurring feasts asked for by Jesus are here metamorphosed into an alternative rhyming form, meaning beneficences, gifts, acts of kindness, related to the word ihsan, meaning right action, worshipping God as if one sees him, acting as if face to face with the divine. Or, as it was also understood in Sufi teaching, the sheer beneficence of the divine acting through us when we have ceased to be other. The title then we might translate as the heavenly banquets of direct knowing and the beneficent favours of right action. The title also suggests a very interesting spiritual connection to Jesus, not Jesus in the sense of a prophet prior to Muhammad, but a symbol of the Spirit itself, the one who revives the dead, who gives the life of knowledge to those in ignorance of reality, the perfectly transformed soul who is completely identified with the light of the Spirit, so that all that flows from them is divine action. I'm trying to suggest in this paper that there is a dichotomy between Niazi and mystery, and there is a dichotomy between single and multiple, inner and outer. In Banquet 47, we have the most metaphysical explanation that Niazi gives of oneness, Wahdat, and multiplicity, Kesret. He writes, reality and unique essence are one, in which there is no multiplicity. If you look at the reality that appears in any way, you say, it is haq in terms of being reality, and it is khalq in terms of its external appearance. If you relate oneness to manyness, you say God, ilah. It is one of the most amazing things that so many aspects enter into a single reality. If you consider that the external appearance of being, which consists of a single reality, is always a place of revelation of its interior, you say, he is the one who reveals, and he is the one who is revealed too. This is pure wahdat al-wujud. And then he writes, classically, be amazed at this. But if you realize this completely, cease to be amazed, because he exists. He exists in his essence, without there being any other than himself in existence. This is classic Ibn Arabi teaching, that in the face of reality, what affects us directly is hayra, perplexity. If there is no perplexity, one can say the real nature of unity has not been tasted or understood. Many people talk about tawheed, tawheed in Turkish. Truth is one, but it's often imagined that tawheed is some kind of monolith, a single stone-like belief that must lie at the fundamental basis of being religious. Like the God who is found in the mosque, but not in the bazaar. In the chapel, but not in the home. In the synagogue, but not in the self. Such constructs lead directly to non-acceptance of any belief that apparently contradicts our own. And of course then to sectarian antagonism and even violence. But such a situation is logically absurd. We believe in tolerance, and yet we behave intolerantly. We believe in love of God, and yet we cannot love our neighbour. As Ibn Arabi so graphically put it, how many walk upon the earth, and the earth curses them? How many prostrate upon her, and she rejects them? How many invoke God, yet their words go no further than their lips, their thoughts no further than their mind? The heart of mysticism, really, is to go beyond this kind of divided thinking and living, beyond do's and don'ts, beyond practices to deep experience and realization. This is universally relevant to all of us, every human being. It involves a close analysis of how we behave, how we think, how we treat ourselves and others, and a thorough appreciation of our deepest potential. This emphasis, Akbarian emphasis, on the immense dignity of man as complete human being, is a critique at the same time of our present state of division and pretension. And it is greatly needed as an antidote to the widespread suffering and ignorance that humans are prey to and is so evident today. Because of time, I'm going to shorten the next part I want to go on to really speak about the only essential point that needs to be made. More than anything, the Akbarian tone of Niazi's discourse is to be found in his emphasis on the realization that the only being is God, and that the true reality of the human being is as servant or poor, faqir. As he puts it in Banquet 1, when discussing the saying by Jilani, when poverty is complete, that is God. He writes, the completion of poverty is to revoke being from everything except God. When being is removed, the real of haq is seen and never disappears. Being is one, but it has many levels. At one level, it appears as the lover, at another as the beloved. At one level, it is the rose, at another, the nightingale. Then quoting the famous verses at the beginning of Futuhat al-Makkiyah, which encapsulate the paradox of being truly human, where total freedom is found within the prescriptions that have been divinely ordained. As Ibn Arabi writes, the Lord is haq, the servant is haq. Would that I knew who is the obligated one, al-mukallaf. If you say the servant, he's dead. And if you say the Lord, how can he be obligated? Ibn Arabi often asks questions of us. The resolution of this apparent paradox is for Niazi that all being is actually God's. To confer being on a creature is only metaphorical. If he knows that his self has no existence, he realizes that what being he has belongs to God. To be Akbarian, then, means nothing less than accepting the full weight of the meaning which Ibn Arabi represents, the meaning of the perfect man, and realizing within our own being the impact of being completely faqir towards God, a perfect servant who has no separate existence left, and is nothing but the place of manifestation of the true Lord. At this point, the prayer of the servant, Kullun Niazi, becomes the divine prayer which he prays over us. As Niazi puts it, even his own names, Niazi and mystery, are veils over his true reality. Though in multiplicity, I am called Niazi. In the world of oneness, the secret of God I become. Şimdi kasrete olan adım Niazi söylenir. Alem vahdet içinde sır yazdan